and not just in legislative chambers, just around the country as a whole. Good to have you join us.
Good afternoon, viewers.
So this bill continues to generate controversy. One thought that maybe after the first conversation, the head of this tax reform committee had gone to, that Taiwo Oyedele had gone to answer questions at the National Assembly, that perhaps it will douse the tension around it, but it hasn't. I just want to get your thoughts on the controversy and tension that this is generating.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's unfortunate that the controversy is bringing along with it certain disinformation and misinformation. But on the whole, I think it's a good thing for the country, because this is the first time taxation happens to be at the front burner nationwide. I can't recall when we are having the issue of taxation to generate a lot of controversy as it is currently. I wouldn't want to bore the viewers on the issues that a lot of people have been saying, but I would like to rather delve into some issues already raised. Let me give this background.
Mr. Fashoto, I will take those, because we're going to look at some provisions of this bill, which is why I wanted to explain what it means. But I just wanted to also ask you if you think that these concerns being raised at different quarters, because we've also seen presidential candidates also weighing into this, if you think that they are genuine concerns, or if you think that basically this is just politics.
I can tell you authoritatively that 80% of controversies going on in the country, they are purely political, while only 20% can actually be given a lot of importance. But the political angles cannot be waved away just like that. Why? Because we are talking about the derivation aspect rather than the revenue generation aspect. I don't think that we are having problems with the revenue generation aspect of the tax reform bills, but rather, how do we share the national cake, in quotes? That is exactly, those are the areas generating, controversy. But as I said, let me briefly go over the 4 bills. I've gone through the 4 bills, and the major one of it is the Nigerian tax bill, which tried to repeal all the major tax laws in the country, about 11 of them, and then partially amend about 15 or 20 other tax laws. But the purpose of this is to ensure that we have one-stop shop for any investor in Nigeria, be it local or international investor, to be able to know where they are going. They want our taxation system to have certainty, which is one of the preconditions for a good tax system. The Nigerian tax bill has been able to pull together all the major provisions of all the tax bills we are currently operating, so that when you pick up the Nigerian tax bill, you are sure of where you are going if you want to be an investor or if you are a taxpayer. Then you have the tax administration bill, which has put together how we do administer our taxes in the country. Then you have joint revenue bill, which is actually giving teeth to the current joint tax board, because the current joint tax board is embedded in the personal income tax, and they are only advisory rather than having teeth to bite. Then the last one is trying to replace the current Federal Inland Revenue Tax Service with Nigerian Revenue Service Establishment Bill, which tend to make it to be a federation outfit rather than a federal government outfit. So that's just the summary of that. And then we are having a lot of lofty provisions in all these taxation bills. It's like restructuring our revenue generation system. But we have to note that the Taiwo Oyedele committee is not focusing only on the taxation aspect. It's also focusing on the whole gamut of fiscal policies in the country. So that is why the discussion should go beyond the current 4 tax bills, because we still have certain provisions of the Constitution that must be amended. Even this VAT, this value-added tax that we are all clamoring for, as it is now legally, we are operating it under the doctrine of necessity in the country because it negates the provisions of the Constitution. Value-added tax is under the residual list of the Constitution and it strictly belongs to states. So states ought to be operating it, but because all the states that are supposed to be complaining, they are not complaining. That is why we are having it currently being administered.
Mr. Fashoto, let's talk about that because I wanted to start from a different place, but you have mentioned it. This is a particular clause that seems to be causing a lot of tension, especially with state governors. It talks about, and that's in the clause 77 of the Nigeria Tax Administration Bill. What it does is to talk about the formula for sharing the value-added tax, which is also the consumption tax. And now it's saying the VAT distribution to the federal government will now be 15%, 10%, from 15%, and then concedes 55% and 35% to state government and then local government councils respectively. But it also provides clause 22, which is where the problem is, subsection 12, that a 60% derivation shall be reflected in the sharing formula of VAT, standing to the credit of states and local government in the spirit of fairness and justice. But a lot of governors are saying, look, that's not fairness and justice, because when it comes to VAT, it is production and consumption. And so for most of them, they do not necessarily have production. And so that's going to be a problem in terms of revenue.
Well, there is nothing in the bills to support some of the assertions being made on this section 77 of the Nigerian Tax Administration Bill, as well as section 22 subsection 12 of the same bill. Why? What that section 77 is saying, that the horizontal share of the proceeds from the VAT should be shared based on 60% derivation. But unfortunately, section 22, subsection 12, does not give broad explanation as to what is meant by derivation. Then don't forget, another fear from another region of the country is that the basic food items are exempted from VAT, meaning that there is fear that they may not have adequate VAT to share if no VAT is being collected on basic food items. That is,
and that's the region where food comes from.
Exactly. So, but the intendment of the committee, as explained in different fora, is that we are not talking about derivation as to where you are collecting the VAT, but rather derivation as to where the economic activities that culminated in the VAT to be paid will be derived. So there are two different things. Currently, we share the VAT revenue based on where you collect the VAT. But that's not the intendment of the current committee when these bills are passed into law. So it means that in the north, for example, where we have mostly food items being produced, agricultural items, there is, some of the inputs they are having, they command VAT, and they must have paid VAT on some of those things. It is their final products that will not yield any VAT. But the VAT that have been generated in the cost of producing those agricultural products, they will have VAT produced, which they will share. So that fear should be allayed. And I will, at this juncture, implore the committee to simulate the scenario with live data of the current VAT being shared based on this new formula. That is what I will suggest to be able to allay the fears. Then, as regards the issue of derivation, we have to know that it's no longer going to follow what we are currently practicing, because what we are currently practicing favors only two states predominantly, that's Lagos and Rivers. But with their intendment, is going to be equitably shared among all states of the federation. And the area, the way to actually allay the fear is for live simulation of the data by this committee. You will say that the fear will be allayed. Then, if you allow me, let me touch on some other fears being raised.
Prof, sorry, Mr. Fashoto, just a minute. We will get there, but I just wanted to stay on this for a while because you mentioned Lagos and Rivers. But doesn't this also mean that, shouldn't this VAT, that derivation formula drive governors to increase production activities in their state?
Even at the current production level, states will still get, if the sharing formula is based on the intendment of this committee, states will still get higher value-added tax proceeds than what they are currently getting under the current system. But at the same time, it's also now going to stimulate them to increase VAT production, items that will yield them higher VAT. But it doesn't mean that they are currently producing low VAT command products. So I don't see any fear to be entertained by these people, but the missing link is that the committee is not stimulating the current live data based on the new formula, but rather people are still seeing the sharing formula in the light of the current derivation formula.
So, Mr. Fashoto, one of the things that I also noticed in this, one of the clauses in the reform bills is, like you have mentioned, the VAT for food items. I think there's also renewable energy, all of that being taken out. But the thing is that people are saying, look, if you take VAT for food items out, but you're increasing VAT for other items to from 7.5 to 10%, that at least for Nigerians, what you are trying to achieve in one aspect will be nullified by the increase in another aspect.
Nigerians have choice. This is a proposal, and I'm happy that the committee has said that it's not insistent on any aspect. They are not defending anything, but rather they are explaining the content. So what do we need to do? Let us tinker with some of these provisions. If we believe, personally, I believe that jumping from the current 7.5 to 10% by next year is too hasty. I think that we can still defy it by 1 year. Let us see how we stabilize the commencement of the new bills, the operation of the new bills. Then, by the time we start increasing the VAT, then the economic activities would have been stimulated and everybody will be better off when we are looking at this whole scenario. So I wouldn't think that it's taken from one hand and giving out from the other hand. Because we have to also know that government rely absolutely on taxation, or basically on taxation to fund its operations. That's the only, stable government legitimate revenue source. So whenever we are reducing the revenue for the government, we should also think of how we are going to reduce their responsibilities. So if we reduce revenue from one side, then we have to see how we stimulate economic activities in other areas that will make people to pay more taxes. But everybody, it's going to be a win-win situation for everybody.
I also wanted to touch on a part of this particular bill, and I'm which is the one for me, where I'm wondering how that is going to play out, which is where it requires that if you want to open a bank account, I'm trying to remember that clause now, where if you're opening a bank account, you have to present your tax identification. And I'm wondering for the informal sector, what that would mean. Doesn't that then mean that for those who are banked, you're going to in fact, now we're going to have more monies outside of the bank than even in the bank?
Well, you will realize that majority of economic activities, that is the major ones, must definitely and surely pass through the banking system. I don't see anybody, doing a business of 1 billion naira, and he's saying that I'll be doing it outside the banking sector. There must be one way or the other where this thing will have to go through the formal system. But as regards that provision, what he's saying is that every Nigerian must have tax identification number. And they are proposing that the NIN should serve as the tax identification numbers for individuals, while the registration number or the incorporation number should be for the community. But the community is here to come up with what should be the tax identification numbers for ministries, agencies, and parastatals. So they need to come up with that. So with that one, we will have unique identity attributable to each taxpayer in the country. And what does it take? If you have your tax identification number, just like you have your NIN, why are you afraid of disclosing that one when you are opening your bank account? I don't see anything wrong in that. Because of the trust deficit, we believe that any increase in tax is going to jeopardize the interests of the taxpayers in the country. But it's not so. Abroad, we are talking about people paying bills because they have all their basic necessities being catered for by the government. By the time we are having such a situation in Nigeria, then we'll be able to trust government. The trust deficit will be removed. And we will be happy to open our bank account with our name, with our tax identification number, with the registration numbers of the company. And government will get more revenue, and provided they are utilizing the revenue for the good of the citizens, then everybody is going to be a win-win situation. So that will be my own advice.
But, and I hear you.
People to go outside the formal system.
And I hear you, but this condition is not just for opening a bank account, it's also for maintaining a pre-existing bank account. And for people who are already, I mean, right now, to even get the cash limits, from the ATMs, it's terrible. And then, you're looking for cash, you have to go to the POS. For a lot of people who already, especially what we saw during the cash crunch, where people refuse to put money in the banks, they rather keep it at home because, they will have access to it. Isn't that, are we not at risk, of pushing that same mindset where people feel like, so if I don't have a tax ID, I cannot operate a bank account, whether I have one already or have to open one, then why do I have to put my money in the bank?
Now, we are delving into the realm of monetary system. We're having the fiscal policy, we are having the monetary policy. It is the duty of the monetary system to ensure that the banks, they have enough money in their ATM, that the banks are carrying out their legitimate duties rather than swindling their customers. So what is happening in the economy now? I think CBN needs to be alive to its responsibility to ensure that the bankers are not taking advantage of their customers. But by the time the monetary policy is properly implemented, fiscal policy, which is the area of the taxation, will be able to complement that area properly. One part cannot be good while the other part is bad. It means that the weakest link, will be the strength of the chain. If the two systems are working properly, that we can say we have a country called Nigeria to our satisfaction. So we shouldn't leverage the weakness in the monetary sector on why we should improve our tax system. Let us go and register our existing bank accounts with our current tax identification numbers. Let the banks, let them do their job, let them provide enough money in their ATM vault, and Nigeria will be better for it. That will be my advice.
But would it not be, and I'm staying on this because this is the one that perhaps would affect, apart from the removal of, VAT from rents and food and all. But I also want to, because this is what will affect Nigerians, the most, and when they get to the bank and begin to raise this concern. Would it not be preferable to say, or ideal to say, let's get more people into the banking sector before we begin to, push a policy like this? Because you stand the risk of not even, for those who are not unbanked yet, especially in the rural sector, in rural areas, you even stand the risk of keeping them out and not wanting to come in. And especially with the processes that we operate in the country to even get your NIN, we realize how difficult that was, let alone a tax ID.
There is a proverb, cutting the head is not the solution for headache, but rather you have to treat the headache. We have examples in the country. During Babatunde Raji Fashola's era in Lagos State, you are aware that a lot of people were willing to pay their taxes. And what engendered that? Because of good governance. That is why I said that the monetary regulators ought to do their job properly and not the other way around. It's not because we are not having good services from the monetary sector and then we think that we will be able to improve things. I don't think that will ever work. If we are waiting until the time we get more people to the banking sector before we expand the scope of taxation, it may never occur because that is not how certain developed countries develop their tax system and they are better for it. So let us do things in the right way in Nigeria. Then Nigerians will be bold enough to call on his government to govern them properly. That would be my advice.
I also wanted to ask, is there any correlation between these bills rather, and then, because especially when you look at where we are in terms of our economy and the stability of our economy?
There's a lot of correlation, but if you will permit me, there are certain things, there are certain misinformations that have been going on in the country concerning these bills, and which may affect the understanding of the community. A lot of people have been asking why the rush and whether the timing is appropriate. I think that we have no other better time than now, because currently the revenue in the country have been declining, except in the very recent time that we have started witnessing improvement. The debt to the revenue ratio was 96%, meaning that out of 1 million naira we are generating, we are using 960,000 out of it to settle our debt. So when we compare the revenue we are generating in the country with what is happening elsewhere, we observe that we are not even generating up to 1/5 or 20% of what is happening in other areas, such as South Africa, such as Kenya, talk less of United States of America, and other developed economies. So the inflation rate, which is currently 34% in October, is 5 times the global average of 6%. So are we waiting until the economy in Nigeria is fully grounded before we say we have to reform our system? No. So that is the reason for the rush. And the people appear not to really understand this area. Now, what about the timing? Is it the right time or not? This is the right time for doing that. And why are we starting with the tax reform bills? Because all over the world, there is no taxation without representation. Representation aspect means that the people we elected into the legislature must legislate on what you and me are going to do when it comes to taxation. So that is why we have to do that. Then some people have raised the issue that there is re-emergence of inheritance tax. And they are alluding to Section 4 of Section 3 of the Nigerian tax bill, which says that income of a family recognized under any law in the country will be taxable. This is actually, I absolutely agree with these people, because this clause is imported into our personal income tax in this proposed bill. And I suggest that it should be deleted. Otherwise, that will be the re-emergence of inheritance tax. So that section should be removed. Then, some people are claiming whether these bills will impoverish some regions, especially the north in the country. As I've said, I've not seen any area of the bill, that is stating that. The only area which I can allude to their fear is sections 188 and 190 of Nigerian tax bill, which, as I've said earlier, zero rates the agricultural produce, such as food, basic food items. And as I've said, I'm asking the committee, the presidential committee, to simulate with live data what the situation will be under the proposed system. By the time they do that, this region that are entertaining fear will see that they are better off when these new bills, when they are passed into law. So those are the areas I'm aware of that some people are still agitating concerning these new bills.
Mr. Fashoto,
back to your question. Can you repeat me of your question?
So you've already answered it. I was asking if it will lead to economic stability, which you have done. But I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned, I was listening to I think it's the General Secretary of the TUC, Festus Osifu, who was talking about the 800,000. So if you earn for income tax, if you earn 800,000 naira and below, you will not have to pay income tax. But people are saying that that's too small, that perhaps, it should be expanded because it doesn't even capture those who earn minimum wage, because minimum wage in some states now is above 80, for some states it's 80,000, which means that annually some people will earn close to maybe 900 and something thousand naira. Some say it should be expanded to as much as 2 million, as much as 1.5 million, as much as 5 million. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, let me correct one impression there. The first set of income that is exempted will be about 1.1 million. We are talking about the percentage of the rent paid, or 200,000. If you add that one to the 800, you are getting something like 1 million or 1.1 million. My problem with that section is not actually the amount. It's not that amount. But the very first set of tax that will be charged immediately after the zero rate of tax, which is 15%, as against the current 5% we are having. It means that after the allowable income is excluded from your income, it means that the first set of taxation that will be charged will be at 15%. That's too high. It's too steep. I don't think we should jump to that level. Something like 5%, they should start with 5%. We say that after the first 800,000, the next one will be 2.2 million to be charged at 15%. I rather think that if they say that 1 million naira, the next 1 million naira to be taxed at 5%, then they can then go to 10% or 15%. That will be okay. And these things should be properly simulated. And these are the things we can propose. I know that some stakeholders are already making amendments to this, and they are ready to submit this during the public hearing at the National Assembly. But it's not that the lowest amount is too low, because I don't see the highest I've seen among the for the minimum wage happen to be 85,000 per month, and 85,000 per month will translate to 1,020,000 naira in a year. So I don't see it as as too low, but rather the very first tax rate of 15% should be lowered to 5%. That would be my suggestion.
So how does this trickle down? Because that's the question, and this will be my final question, in terms of how this trickles down. Two questions in one, actually. For the average Nigerian, I really don't like using the word average, but for lack of a better word, for the average Nigerian, how does this trickle down? And then if we're able to raise the kind of revenue we're looking at with this bill, does this mean that at least to an extent we'll stop borrowing?
Yes. How does it trickle down? You will observe that when this thing is properly simulated, 80% of people paying income tax will be outside the tax radar, income tax radar. But it doesn't mean that they will still not pay tax, because there is no way you will not buy any valuable item or excise duty item, and so on and so forth. But those are indirect taxes. They will not, the impact will not be as heavy as paying taxes on income. So Nigerians, especially the lowest cadre of Nigerians in terms of income, will be far better off. About 80% of them are shielded from income tax. So it's a win-win situation for that particular level. At this stage, I want to say that some people are also carrying wrong information that certain parastatals will be wind up. That is far from the truth. What they are saying is that instead of those parastatals like Naseni, like tertiary education board, and some other universities, and so on and so forth, rather than being funded from earmark taxes, that they should be funded from the budget. And what does that mean? What's the implication? This committee is looking forward to higher revenue comparable to similar countries in the developed world. If we now have higher revenue, we'll be able to have higher income to share. Why are some organizations, or especially government organizations, resorting to earmark taxes, just like Education Trust Fund and Naseni tax or police tax? Because they don't have enough budgetary allocation. And the basic reason is that the revenue is too low. But by the time we increase our current revenue generation by about 500%, that is times 5 of what we are currently generating, you will find out that it is possible for every government parastatal to be allocated their desired budgetary allocation. And with that one, there will not be need for any earmarked taxes. So the economy will be better stabilized, and the handshake between the fiscal and monetary authorities of the country will all be better for it, rather than what we are still facing now, because there's a lot of dysfunction in the working of both the monetary as well as fiscal policy aspects of the governance.
Mm. And you've not, the last one was whether this would mean that, at least to an extent, borrowings will be limited.
Why do you need to borrow? For example, you are currently generating 1 billion naira, and under the proposed tax bills, you'll be generating 5 billion naira. You know, currently, as I said earlier on, we are funding debt with 96% of our revenue. But assuming you now raise that revenue by five times, you will have enough to pay off the existing debt, and you will not have costs to go for further debt. So we are looking at a mega situation rather than the current micro level we are treating our revenue generation. So there will not be need for going into more borrowing.
Thank you so much for your time. You have really broken this down. I'm sure that a lot of Nigerians would have learned a lot just from listening. And I hope that those who have agitations as well would have listened to how you broke this down and get more understanding on the bill. The bills. Managing partner of Gabe Fashutol and Co. and former president, Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Gabriel Fashutol. Thank you so much for your time. A pleasure to have you on.
You're welcome.
All right, let's take a break now. When we return, we'll be looking at the anti-corruption war in the country. Stay with us.
Doubt and fear doesn't occur at the canvas, it shows in the canvas. It shows the conation of raw ether material slabbed, stroked and molded at a pace provided by the doubt and fear. Every move way in the struggle of one to the other, merging the past to the present, brushstrokes of colors seen but not known. For when the wailing stops, the pieces settle down in abject beauty erected for a century of a century. Speaking, advocating, protesting as the arts are meant to be.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Honey, what time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV station of the year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Meet Benga Oreshegun, a fearless voice and an advocate for the truth. He's bringing fresh energy and bold insights to Journalists Hangout.
Get ready for deeper analysis and dynamic perspectives. Join me and Babajide Kolade Otitoju with other veteran journalists on Journalists Hangout. Weekdays from 5 p.m. and on Sundays, 1:30 p.m.
The Inspector General of Police has met with senior officers to review the state of security.
We are continuing our coverage of the arrest of Godwin Emefiele.
The Senate has summoned the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to properly brief the Senate regarding the state of the economy.
What I will never take is threat.
Let's now bring you more development from Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, where an explosion has taken place. Tell us about this incident.
TVC News, first with breaking news.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrency.
Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate fact from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News, first with breaking news.
Voted as the best TV station of the year. TVC News breaks into the core of every event as they happen. Following all nationwide big and impactful stories. We tell the news from every perspective, covering every human angle. I am Veronica, bringing you the news you would want to watch.
The TVC News at 7 and the TVC News at 10 are not like any other news broadcast.
It's the big news hour, the hour for the big breaking stories.
We've got some of the best reporters on the field,
taking you through as it happens.
It's fast-paced, hot-paced,
with investigations that matter.
bringing in news that affects your life.
With sport, entertainment, and business news, so you don't miss a thing.
Experiential, sourceful coverage was depth.
Epic.
Thanks for staying with us now. Led by Chairman Ola Olukoyede, the EFCC successfully secured a court order last Monday to take control of a massive estate comprising 753 duplexes. Now, former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele, along with his associates, has allegedly been linked to the ownership of the estate seized in Goma, Abuja. Let's bring you the report.
Since its establishment in 2002, this is the Commission's single largest recovery. This estate, located in Goma, contains over 740 buildings of terraces, duplex, block of flats, and semi-detached duplex. From the master plan, it is to also have a school and a shopping mall. The Commission had, through an application filed before the court, argued that it had reasonable suspicion that the property have been acquired or developed with process of unlawful activities pursuant to Section 17 of the Advanced Free Fraud Act. On 1st November 2024, Justice Jude Onwebuze of the FCT High Court Apo granted an order of interim forfeiture for the estate, which measures 150,500 square meters. The interim order was to be published in any widely read national newspaper to enable any of the interested party appear before the court to show costs within 14 days, while the final order of forfeiture of the property sought to be forfeited should not be made in favor of the federal government. Now, the court has granted an order for final forfeiture of the property said to belong to a top government official. The commission is keeping the name of the owner under wraps until it is safe to do an all blown out exposure. An order of final forfeiture gives right to the federal government over the property. With this order of final forfeiture, the EFCC has not taken possession of this property. Celestina Iria, TVC News, Abuja.
All right, let's now bring in constitutional lawyer Malaki Ogumadu as he joins us via Zoom for more on this development. Good to have you join us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. Good afternoon now.
So, what do you make of this latest development from the EFCC and then the refusal of the EFCC to name who this person is, even though some have now, some people have now had access to the court documents?
Well, first of all, let us be clear, and let us put it in perspective, that all of these revelations are very sad commentaries in the history of this country, where as much as 700 units of real property are ascribed to be the subject of proceeds of crime, because that's the basis upon which the jurisdiction of the EFCC is invoked. Having said that, the second point to be established is that the EFCC is well within its powers, and I'm referencing the powers under the Enabling Act, EFCC Establishment Act, to proceed on property suspected to be proceeds of crime, and in respect of which no person can lay valid claim to its ownership or their ownership. And on the basis of that, these units of property have been published, made known to the public giving express permission to come forward if anyone claims or knows the ownership of these units. That is what the law says. That where you find properties or any other valuable item in respect of which you suspect or reasonably know must have been the proceeds of a crime, you can announce to the public, just so that the owner or ownership of it first is established and the proper claim can be made. Where the person or purported owner fails to show up and you have sufficient evidence, at least a prima facie evidence establishing that these are proceeds of crime, you can approach the court for a forfeiture. If they fail, having given the opportunity to come on board through public announcement, public advertisement, public newspaper publications, then those property can be forfeited to the federal government. I think that is the state we are. And rather than the hush-hush acclamations of ownership, once you come out, but the onus is on you once you come out to justify the ownership. And that is where we are. It is not peculiar to the country.
Mr. Malaki, if I may quickly come here, because of the limited time that we have, I want to try and throw in as much questions as I can.
I'm sorry, so I just went on.
It's fine, but two issues here. One of them is, how do you even get approval for a project like this? This is massive. There are states in this country, but I'm not sure if we've had one in this capacity, 753 duplexes. Getting approval for a project like this without background checks. What's your thought on that?
Well, it remains the sorry tale of corruption and corrupt practices in this country. And you may be shocked. Those properties, without sounding very conclusive, may belong to either public servants, civil servants, or government appointees. In short, only 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken, I had the privilege of addressing the same EFCC in their Lagos office during a public gathering, which they termed town hall meeting. And I said, we may not have to go into the inherent contradiction that underscores the problematic situation that the country finds itself in its fight against corruption, where an agency of government established by government is positioned and expected to deliver on the fight against corruption. There is an inherent contradiction in that. In fact, if you check a survey of corruption all over the world, and no less in the African continent, you will find that the least corrupt entities are governments of each state. So, but I left that debate. Now, what you talk about speaks to the very orchestrated, a properly grounded syndicate, effectively oiled system of corruption, by which all the rules of procurement, of approval, of engagement, of execution are undermined by a string of corrupt elements, not just in business circles, but in government establishment, making it possible for this kind. And make no mistake about it, this is not the first time. It's actually not a fresh news. The story about high-rising buildings, expensive estates, expensive property, littered all over the major cities of the country and owned by public and civil servants, it's not a fresh news in our country.
Mr. Malaki, sorry to interrupt, but it's the reason I want to ask you, because what you just said is quite important. Because one of the strategies of the EFCC seems to be asset recovery, and they believe that would help in when you don't have benefit, when you can't reap the benefits of your corruption, perhaps that will halt corruption in its track. But some say that's not enough, because you have mentioned that it's a chain. That, naming, shaming, prosecution, it should be another focus, or the biggest focus. What would you say to that?
That's a mute point, and I subscribe to the perspective that you have just highlighted. However, you see, in that business of corruption, what ought to even be done, what needs to be taken on properly, is to de-incentivize corruption and nip it. All of the factors that give rise to corruption in a society ought to be taken care of. If you look at Section 15, Section 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, dealing with the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policies, you will find that it is one of the economic objectives of Nigeria to abolish all forms of corruption and abuse of office. That is even a constitutional provision. But it doesn't end there. What needed to be done as a follow-up for the realization of that lofty objective as a principle of state is to deal with the socio-economic conditions that lead to this corruption in the first place. For instance, the economy. How effectively run is the economy? If you look at Section 16 of that constitution that I've also quoted. It talks about how the wealth of the country ought to be evenly distributed, how they need to be employment, how they need to be healthcare, how they need to be up to pension, up to retirement benefits, and so on and so forth. All of those things ought to be taken seriously. You undermine it and harvest a system that encourages and incentivizes people trying to primitively accumulate for the rainy days. But that is not an excuse. The point being that at the end of the day, what is missing is that our society is reactive to the incidence of corruption rather than proactively attacking those conditions that lead to corruption in the first place. Now, you have questions about just asset recovery being the, well, to some extent, it's working. Because when you now deprive a man of the proceeds of crime, what then will be the benefit of going into it in the first place? But the question is, how many people know about it? These people who go on stealing this country blind, bleeding the country to death, are not even bothered about what the law says, let alone knowing what they could lose the event of such a. So my position finally, because I can see that you want me to, my position finally is that, yes, of course, we could start that way. The law does not mandate them to name those people. However, it can become a campaign issue, that it doesn't just stop at taking away this whole asset from them. It will make a whole deal of difference if they are identified, brought to the public, shamed, and so that the youth and the younger ones will see how not to live their life.
I mean, you made a really great point, and I really wish we could continue this conversation because it's quite an interesting one, but we do have to leave it there. Constitutional lawyer Malaki Gumbadu, you know that it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. We'll always look forward to having you again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, that's StandPoint this week. Remember, you can watch a repeat broadcast at 11 p.m. tonight and 5 a.m. on Sunday morning. I am Precious Amayo. Thanks for watching.
I'm Lunge. I'm a passionate environment advocate and a published author.
I am the founder of Celebration, a businesswoman, and a fashion icon.
I am a wealth coach and a real estate developer.
I am Amaka Arakwe. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer and an entrepreneur.
Barkamu da warhaka. I am Ramatu Shehu Oyibo, an entrepreneur and a business coach.
I am the voice of an average Muslim woman, an hijabite, and a lawyer.
I am a polymath and a serial entrepreneur.
I am Murayo Afolabi Brown, Managing Director, TVC Entertainment. I'm a media consultant, producer, and broadcaster.
The ladies of Your View are made of women from different professions, tribes, cultures, and religion. Join us every Monday to Friday as we share our views on topical and social issues.
They swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people. They traded their freedom, comfortable homes, and mortgaged their lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, loyal, and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. Put on the remembrance emblem to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
Thank you for your patriotic commitment to Nigerian unity, stability, and progress.
Parastatals, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to these accounts. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Information is power, information is security, information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Ijason, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
At TVC News, wherever the big news story is happening, we're geared up to break it. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Good morning, Marina Station and all the passengers. Efficient, it's comfortable.
This development will go a long way in reducing congestion and emission.
The trains are a long-term solution to Lagos traffic challenges.
This is where we take the final, decisions on policies, programs of government. I will have to ensure that, the narration of Lagos as a PLC is taken very, very seriously.
This is a major pedestrian bridge linking Oyinbo here to Apapa Road over there.
With this overpass, we are providing what we call a permanent solution.
This place is one of the most dangerous areas at the biosecurity environment.
This can go into the news and every crumbs of your neighborhood.
Our goal is to remain as Africa's model megacity, to move our GDP from the 5-6 position to the 3rd position, and we believe it's achievable with all the commitments we have.
Explore the city of Lagos, where dreams are made and possibilities are endless. Amadedoja Salamadini, I live in Lagos, inside Lagos.
There is always more to a story than the screaming headline. The part of a story that is not told casts a shadow. It's like the part of an object that is not reached by light. On TVC News, I'm able to explore the many angles there are to a story, talking to stakeholders, asking the difficult questions, and digging for facts. I believe the viewers are able to make a better decision if they're well informed and understand not just a part, but the complete story. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Thanks for staying with us. This is The World Now. We start off in Africa with focus on Ghana, where polls opened today in the presidential and legislative elections. Some 18.7 million people registered to vote in the West African country hit by one of the worst economic crises in a generation. Now, although 12 candidates are running to become Ghana's next president, today's election has emerged as two-horse race. Vice President Mahamudu Bawumia is the candidate of the ruling New Patriotic Party. He faces off against former President John Mahama, who is the leader of the main opposition party, National Democratic Congress. He was voted out in 2016 after failing to deliver on promises for the economy. 276 members of parliament will also be elected. And now to Burkina Faso, where the ruling military leader Ibrahim Traoré has dismissed the country's prime minister and dissolved the government. The ousted Prime Minister Joachim Kielem de Tambela had served as head of 3 successive governments, surviving multiple reshuffles. However, no official reason has been given for his removal. Mr. Tambela was appointed Prime Minister in October 2022, following the coup that brought Ibrahim Traoré to power. The decree announced that the Prime Minister's official functions are terminated and stated that members of the dissolved government would continue handling ongoing matters until a new government is formed. We're staying in Africa still, moving now to Mozambique, where the death toll from the protest in the country has increased. Reports say smoke filled the state streets of Maputo on Friday evening as supporters of presidential candidate Venancio Modlani set tires ablaze and blocked roads. The protest, fueled by anger over the disputed October elections, quickly escalated, leading to violent clashes with security forces. Local police reported at least 5 deaths and 3 serious injuries. However, a local NGO claimed that the true death toll is significantly higher, with at least 88 fatalities reported from the demonstrations. The protests are a direct challenge to the election results, with demonstrators demanding justice and fairness in the political process. As tensions rise, concerns are growing about the future of Mozambique's democracy. Let's turn our attention now to Nigeria, where governments at all levels have been asked to increase funding for the education, protection and well-being of children. Country representative of the United Nations Student Education Fund, Christian Munduate, gave the charge during the presentation of the summary of the 2024 situation analysis of children and adolescents in Nigeria. Judith Irenua has more in this report.
Indicates that Nigeria has about 110 million children and adolescents. This nearly accounts for half of the country's total population. The substantial youth demography presents a strategic opportunity to invest in human capital development and drive long-term social progress. However, the 2024 UNICEF Situational Report on the state of Nigeria's children, produced in collaboration with the federal government, reveals that more concerted efforts are required at all levels of government to adequately address the needs of this critical segment of the population. According to data, about 8 million children are born in Nigeria each year. However, 41 out of every 1,000 newborns do not survive. Furthermore, for every 100,000 women who give birth, 1,047 die due to poverty and inadequate medical care. Nigeria also has the highest number of zero-dose children. 2.1 million children never received any form of vaccine, with 31% of this number 1 year and below. Now, despite several intervention programs by government to reduce poverty among society's most vulnerable members, children are still left behind. 67.5% aged 0 to 17 experience multiple forms of poverty, with 51% of all multidimensionally poor people in Nigeria being children. In recent decades, the country made progress towards increasing school enrollment, but 10.2 million children of primary school age are still out of school. While the nationwide education completion rate has improved, 4 million children still fail to do so. These statistics are a call for urgent action and a multi-sectoral approach to improving their well-being.
To make our country and the world a better place for our children.
Now gathered here are key players in the media, government and private sector. They are here to find ways of collaboration to scale up interventions and effectively implement existing policies for children. Focus is especially on the critical role of the media in streamlining these issues affecting children in Nigeria.
So you can definitely make a difference for children. Next, the whole idea is how to place children at the top of the national agenda. How you, as a very powerful sector of society, because you do play a powerful drive in the country, how you can help us keep children alive at the top of the agenda in the country. Your child only once in a lifetime. So we cannot make plans for 2030, right? To improve education or to improve health, because the child is now. And the child cannot wait, because as human beings, we grow. The opportunity that you don't give today, you will never give it in no moment.
And it cannot just be the same rhetoric that we keep repeating over and over again. There has to be a call to action in a way that the leaders cannot ignore. And the only way to do this is to tell the right stories.
President of the Nigerian Guild of Editors agrees that these stories about children must be told despite existential issues.
The time for passive reporting is over. Let us embrace solution-based journalism. That is reporting that not only highlights problems, but also explores and advocates for remedies. Let us ensure that child's rights are not relegated to the margins of our news circles, but are front and center where they belong.
The gathering went into panel sessions to discuss how to effectively protect children and ensure their safety amidst increasing insecurity in the country.
We want to see the media get involved in this struggle to better the lot of the Nigerian child.
The consensus among key players is the need for urgency in tackling issues affecting children in Nigeria, as childhood is fleeting. Judith Irenwa, TVC News, Lagos.
You're watching The What Now. We'll take a break and return with more stories. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Let's turn our attention now to Romania, where the top court has annulled the result of the first round of the country's presidential election in an unprecedented move. This means the entire election process will have to be rerun. The decision came after declassified intelligence documents alleged Russia financed the campaign to promote far-right candidate Călin Georgescu on platforms such as TikTok and Telegram. Reports say Mr. Georgescu had not declared any campaign spending, but emerged as a front-runner following the first round on 24th of November. He was due to face pro-EU Elena Lasconi of the Save Romania Union Party in a runoff on Sunday. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol has survived a vote of impeachment after the vote was boycotted by governing party lawmakers. This comes after a number of lawmakers left parliament ahead of the vote. This report gives an overview to the drama that transpired earlier today before the impeachment vote process.
Law earlier this week. At least 200 lawmakers are needed for the vote to be carried out. Outside the main hall, opposition lawmakers could be heard shouting. Though voting was underway, it is speculated that it has been rendered irrelevant, as numbers counted will not be enough for the motion to pass. Less than 2/3 of parliament now remain in the chamber. If, as expected, it fails, the next available date lawmakers can vote on Yoon's impeachment is Wednesday, December 11th. President Yoon had in the early hours of today apologized to the nation in his first public comments since his abortive attempts to impose martial law threw the country into political chaos and led to calls for his impeachment. Addressing rumors that martial law will be invoked again, President Yoon said there will absolutely be no second attempt at a constitutional amendment. The declaration of a military emergency, although short-lived, was met with shock and anger across the country, which remains deeply scarred by the brutality of martial law imposed during decades of military dictatorship before it won a long, bloody fight for democracy in the 1980s. Pressure on President Yoon has mounted in the days since, with protesters and opposition figures demanding his impeachment and support wavering even within his own party and the military. President Yoon's apology came as new details emerged of the arrest list the president came up with during the upheaval, a significant turning point that prompted the chief of Yoon's own party, Han Dong-hoon, to call for the president's suspension on Friday. Even if he survives the vote, President Yoon's future remains uncertain after the leader of his party said his resignation was inevitable.
Now to the Middle East, where rebels are still making gains against the forces of President Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Reports say the militants are approaching their third major city and have seized a major military base. Syria is now split between three factions. That's the rebels, led by Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, President Bashar al-Assad's forces, and Kurdish-led troops to the north. The rebels began the offensive from the province of Idlib and then moved west into Aleppo. And still on the conflict in Syria, where there have been scenes of jubilation. This comes after rebels claimed another major city known as Hama in their rapid advance against the forces of President Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian army said it withdrew from the city on Friday and took positions to guard civilians outside the city. Hama was the home of some of the biggest protests during the Arab Spring in 2011. It's also where up to 40,000 people were killed in government attacks 4 decades ago in what came to be known as the Hama massacre. Let's bring in global affairs analyst Ejike Okbad into this conversation as we look at the latest developments which are happening rapidly in Syria. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me state that he's joining us from the United States via Zoom. Thank you. I just want to, because this is so rapid, there's been civil war in Syria for a really long time, but we're seeing just almost, similar to what we saw in Afghanistan, how that unfolded rapidly. What's your thought on this and the impact it could have on the Middle East, where you already have conflict and turmoil?
A lot of things are going on in the Middle East, and Syria was able to have sustained the rebels' attack, at the beginning of this war because Russia was behind it. Now, Russia got emboldened with what is going on with Ukraine, so Russia has lost interest in Syria, and the Syrian government doesn't have the resources, to withstand what the rebels are doing. So that's why you see all that crisis. And then Israel himself got this conflict with Hamas and Hezbollah. So Syria is left alone and now scrambling. Who knows? Maybe if this thing continues, Damascus might fall, and then that whole place will unravel, and then we'll have more crisis in our hands.
Are we seeing the beginning of the end of the Bashar al-Assad dynasty?
I think it's likely to happen. Who knows? Let's see what happens when Trump comes in, because Trump's position is that we don't need all these wars. Countries have to now be responsible, to govern their own territory and be responsive to their own citizens. So when you have all these crises and you have, the West and European countries taking part, maybe all that is going to come to an end. Because there's so much stuff going on in the Middle East, and everybody's tired. The people fighting are tired, and the people supplying them the arms are tired, and so I'm hoping that the president will just come to terms and say, you know what, this dynasty it's not worth it. So many people have died. What is the gain at the end?
I want to talk about what happened in Afghanistan. I referenced it earlier, and then what happened in Israel on October 7th, 2023. Which of these events, because we're seeing a lot of rebel movements in the Middle